buffs. There's something we all dream about happening to our favorite characters, but unfortunately they're also something Hoyoverse just doesn't do. Now to an extent they do technically buff some characters by releasing new ones that synergize well with them, but today we're going to be talking about actual changes to their kits. Now for this video I just wanted to preface that this is purely for fun. Some of these changes I suggest are completely absurd and probably wouldn't even make sense adding them to the game. I also tried my best to just avoid boring buffs, like just making a character do more damage, and always tried to go for something that is a bit more interesting. And finally, if you have any fun ideas for buffs yourselves, please let me know in the comments. Alright, let's get started with our destruction characters. To start us off, we have Arlan. Now, Arlan is definitely one of the weakest characters in the game, but I've always found his kit very interesting. It's this super high risk playstyle where he consumes a lot of HP to do damage, and he does more damage at lower health. Now, unfortunately, with this high risk, Arlan doesn't really get a high reward, since his damage is very questionable. And as easy it is for me to just say double his multipliers, let's try and make the changes a bit more interesting. Firstly, we have his talent. Arlan's damage increases for every percent of HP he's missing up to a max of 72%. I say we just bump this up a bit, let him get damage all the way down to 1% health, because why not? Now his A2 trace is where Arlan gets some help with his survivability, where he heals when defeating an enemy. This is a bit of a strange one, because Arlan likes playing at low health, and built in his kit is this self-heal. Let's make this a bit more useful and just change it to shielding. Whenever Arlan consumes HP, he also gains a shield for the same amount, so when he uses his skill, he'll always get a 15% shield. And in addition, we'll keep that same effect from before, so when he defeats an enemy, he still gains a shield of 20% of his max HP. To kick us off for our 5 stars, we have Blade. Now if you want to listen to me ramble about how Hoyo might genuinely help Blade out, I have a video all about that if you want to check it out, but for this time we're going to go with something different. Something that's always interested me is how in the lore Blade is essentially unkillable. You can stab him right through the heart and he'll just stand back up in a few seconds. Now in the combat, for some reason the only thing that kind of shows this is his follow-up attack that heals him when he gets hit 5 times. His ult can also kind of be used to make him a bit tankier by setting his HP to 50%, but other than that, Blade isn't really showing us why he's this unkillable beast in the lore. Revives is also not a mechanic that is foreign to Star Wars, but for some reason the guy who actually can't die in the lore doesn't have one at all. I say we give Blade not 1, but 3 revives, and we also bump up the HP drain from his skill and his enhanced basics. Now we aren't just giving him this revive for nothing. I say every time Blade dies, he comes back stronger. Maybe for each death he gets more damage percent. Something like this would make our playable Blade a bit more lore accurate. For our next character, Clara, I couldn't actually think of something too crazy because her kit is honestly super cohesive and works perfectly together. I have 2 ideas for what they could give Clara. Her E6 is super interesting as it gives Svarog a chance to counter when any ally on your team is attacked, regardless of if her ult is active. I think having a nerfed version of this in her base kit could be super interesting. Clara does say she wants to help as well in her ult voice line, so why not let her do the counter attack? Maybe when allies are hit, Clara whips out a hammer and goes and smacks the enemy. Another buff to her kit that could be interesting is have Svarog scale throughout the combat. Similar to how we talked about Blade getting stronger every time he dies, Svarog gets angrier every time Clara is hit, and he does more damage for every time Clara has been hit in the combat. For our boy Imbibitor Lunae, we're gonna keep it nice and simple. Danheng is already eating up your skill points to do big damage, but why are we stopping at 3? Let our Danheng players go all the way up to 7 skill points for that enhanced basic, and he can drop a whole nuke on the enemies. And instead of making it just do more damage, maybe at the highest skill point uses, we can let him do a full AoE attack instead of just his usual blast. Something that's always thrown me off about Hook is how she's basically a hunt character. While nothing in the game really tells us that destruction is meant to be blast damage, with our limited ones, Jingliu, Imbibitor Lunae and Blade all specializing in it, it kinda just became destruction's thing. Similar to how despite being firework based, Yoimiya was robbed of AoE, I think Hook not having AoE despite having huge explosions in her kit is kinda weird. Let's keep it simple, both Hook's skill and ultimate should just be changed to blast damage, which fits the destruction path a bit more and also plays into her explosive animations. Jingliu is definitely not a character that needs a buff, but we'll cook up one for her anyway. I always liked how Jingliu had 2 different states, so Hoyo had the ability to give her 2 different skills and also 2 basics, except they didn't. Her basic can't actually be used in her enhanced state, so I say let's give her an enhanced basic then. Similar to how her E1 gives her an extra multiplier against a single enemy, what about give her an enhanced basic that is meant for single target scenarios? Just a single target higher damage version of a skill that can be used when there's only one enemy left or you're fighting against a boss. Now, I don't actually know that much about Misha since I don't have him, and even if I did, I don't think I would build him, but from what I've seen, he can actually pop off pretty hard in single target, but seems to struggle a bit in AoE. For his change, let's say for his ult, if it's at 10 stacks, so the max hits it can do, it just becomes a blast ability. This way, Misha works in kind of a similar way to Acheron, where he's really waiting for his teammates to stack his ult, so he can deal big damage in his AoE rather than relying on RNG for where the luggage lands. My favorite thing about Xueyi is how she's this hybrid break effect scaling DPS, who also has a kit that interacts with breaking toughness on the enemies. I say we take the part of her ult that ignores element typing and always does toughness damage and apply it to more parts of the kit. Let's say when this buffed version of Xueyi uses her ult, she enters an enhanced state. While in this enhanced state, all her attacks, so her skill and her follow-up, all ignore element typing and always do toughness bar damage. This would not only help her stack her follow-up more, but also just let her break enemies more often. And finally we have the physical Trailblazer.